the pseudoscience behind modern thinking. The modern illusion. Toughing it out is so 1980s, says today's leadership marketing. It is a clever hook that trades on nostalgia to sell the promise of psychological evolution. The message is simple. Yesterday's grit has been replaced by today's self-awareness. But behind the language of modern resilience, self-observation, and meta-awareness sits a trio of older ideologies: integral theory, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, NLP, and Neuro-Semantics. All three claim to be modern frameworks for understanding human potential. None are grounded in science. These models did not emerge from psychology labs or peer-reviewed research. They came from the same 1970s culture that gave us ESD seminars, pyramid selling, and the New Age fascination with higher consciousness. Integral theory, the philosophy of everything. In 1977, a young American philosopher named Ken Wilber released The Spectrum of Consciousness, proposing that all human knowledge, from physics to mysticism, could be unified into a single framework. It was ambitious, spiritual, and unapologetically grand. Wilber's model divided the world into 4 quadrants. I, subjective experience. We, shared meaning. It, objective systems. It's, interconnected systems. Everything, he said, could be mapped here: mind, culture, biology, and society. His later work, A Theory of Everything, 2000, cemented the idea that personal growth equals evolutionary consciousness. The problem is that integral theory is not a theory in the scientific sense. It has no testable hypotheses, no replicable results, and no peer-reviewed validation. It is a metaphysical system, closer to theology than psychology. Wilber's ideas were compelling to those disillusioned with materialism and reductionism. But in academic psychology, they sit in the same category as Jungian archetypes: interesting, but unprovable. Today, integral theory is often presented as holistic leadership or post-conventional thinking. In reality, it is a philosophical worldview masquerading as developmental science. Neuro-Linguistic Programming, the 1970s mind hack that never worked. Around the same time Wilber was writing about quadrants, 2 young men in California, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, were constructing a model they called Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Their pitch was seductive. By analyzing how successful people think and speak, anyone could reprogram their own mind for success. Neuro-linguistic programming promised instant behavioral change through language and sensory cues. For a while, it looked revolutionary. Then it met science. From the 1980s onward, universities tested neuro-linguistic programming's claims and found that nothing held up. Eye movement patterns did not correlate with honesty. Representational systems, visual, auditory, kinesthetic types, had no neurological basis. Anchoring and reframing produced short-lived placebo effects at best. By the 1990s, neuro-linguistic programming was categorized as pseudoscience by major psychological associations. Yet it lived on in sales training, life coaching, and leadership programs because it felt empowering, even when it was not true. What neuro-linguistic programming sold was not truth. It was the illusion of control through language. In the right hands, that became persuasion. In the wrong hands, manipulation. Neuro-Semantics, the 1990s reinvention. When neuro-linguistic programming's reputation began to crumble, Michael Hall, a former neuro-linguistic programming trainer, stepped in to evolve the field. His new system, Neuro-Semantics, was framed as a more sophisticated, ethical version. Hall introduced the concept of metastates, thoughts about thoughts. He combined neuro-linguistic programming's linguistic tricks with Abraham Maslow's self-actualization model, claiming this integration could elevate consciousness and performance. Essentially, it was neuro-linguistic programming in a lab coat. The same unproven mechanisms, now wrapped in developmental jargon. Neuro-Semantics gave rise to the idea of the metacoach, a practitioner who helps clients move up levels of awareness. But once again, these levels are not measurable. They are abstract, metaphorical, and philosophically circular. The system defines its own evidence. It is clever because you cannot disprove a metaphor. a shared DNA, pseudoscientific confidence. Integral theory, neuro-linguistic programming, and neurosemantics all share one crucial trait. They sound scientific while rejecting scientific method. Each borrows heavily from psychology's vocabulary, using words like neuro, developmental, systems, meta, and integral, but strips away the requirement for empirical proof. Instead, they rely on rhetorical authority. The language of evolution, next stage of consciousness. The aura of neuroscience, neuro prefixes without data. The mystique of mastery, self-actualization, meta-awareness. This is pseudoscience in its purest form, using the style of science to sell untestable ideas. Why they endure. If these models have no basis in evidence, why do they survive? Because they sell three things modern people crave. Simplicity, a clear map for complex lives. Agency, the promise of instant transformation. Belonging, an identity built on higher understanding. They function like secular religions, providing both meaning and method in one package. The jargon makes followers feel advanced. The frameworks offer safety in a chaotic world. But belief does not equal truth. What these systems deliver is certainty dressed as insight, and that is why they spread so easily through coaching, leadership, and corporate culture. The science gap. Contrast this with genuine psychological science, where every concept must withstand falsifiability, the possibility of being proven wrong. Cognitive behavioral therapy, emotional intelligence research, and organizational psychology have all evolved through testing, replication, and peer review. Integral theory, NLP, and neurosemantics have evolved through marketing. They grow not by evidence but by iteration, each generation rebranding the last to sound newer, deeper, and more essential. What modern really means. When leadership materials today claim to have moved beyond 1980s toughness into modern awareness, they are often borrowing language from these same pseudoscientific roots. The irony is clear. What is being sold as cutting-edge psychology actually predates most of the audience. These are not modern frameworks. They are vintage belief systems repackaged for an age addicted to self-optimization. Modern thinking is not about more complex frameworks. It is about critical thinking, the ability to question frameworks themselves. The real work. True resilience is not found in quadrants or metastates. It is found in the measurable, human realities of fatigue, context, and compassion. Real growth is not about self-observation as a discipline. It is about self-understanding as a process. The difference between science and pseudoscience is not complexity. It is accountability.